That moves us into the discussion agenda. Point 15. Mr. Satterfield, he had asked for a point of privilege earlier. Do you want to take this moment real quick just to...
Yeah, thank you. I'll just take a minute. I want to share with people, and I hope people that are out there watching this on YouTube are paying attention to this. I had the honor of attending the science fair at Dutch Fork High School this past weekend. Spent a couple of hours talking to students and looking at their projects, and I was totally amazed. I mean, we have some of the best and brightest students in this district. I had gone to the middle school science fair a couple of weeks earlier, and actually I met Mr. Scully's daughter, who had a really nice project. But I'm going to tell you, we have some kids that are doing some amazing things, and I just wanted to tell them we appreciate their hard work and their efforts, and we're very proud of them. But we also had the director of secondary ed, I guess the director of science and math. I think even Ms. Taylor was there. We had several folks. Were you there, Ms. Miller? I think you were.
I wanted to be there, but I was at home with a sinus infection.
Anyway, but there were several folks there, Mr. McGinty, and we had a lot of folks there. And I got to talk with a lot of parents, and they were so tickled pink that, people were saying nice things about their kids. And that's what we ought to be spending a lot of time doing. But I want to tell you, it was an honor. I planned to kind of go and walk around and, talk to a few of the kids. I really like spending time with the kids. But I was just enthralled, and I couldn't get away from one project after the other. And one of our earlier presenters were talking about the social, emotional health and things. One of our students actually did a project on that. So they are very much attuned to the need for services, and they are very much attuned to what's going on within their schools. But I just want to say that I'm very proud of the students, and proud of our staff that were there too and giving up their Saturday. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheffield. It's always great to hear positivity. Dr. Ross, we can turn it over to you for 15, discussion on proposed revisions to board policy IE, organization of instruction, shown in Exhibit I.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Pursuant to our facilities, master facility workshop, we identified that there would be 7 questions that we wanted to work on to help when we were bringing on a architectural and engineering team to help us with that 5-year study. We talked about minimum conditions. We talked about grade structure, the academic purpose of programs, and utilization rate. I would like to focus in our conversation on the second question: how will District 5 be organized? Policy IE talks about the organization of instruction of our school District 5. This is an item for discussion only, and no action needed. But currently, we have a very unique grade structure and organization structure of District 5, and I believe that we are not able to maximize the academic gains using this current structure. We currently have 9 different levels of grade structure. The proposal for the administration is to move to a 5-level structure, with early childhood being 3 to 4K, elementary, which means all elementary schools would be K through 5, middle, meaning all middle schools will be 6th through 8th, and high school, where all high schools will be 9 through 12. Keeping with our district-wide programs, Academy for Success, Adult Ed, Center for Advanced Technical Studies, and the Flexible Innovative Virtual Education Program. As a result, we just have up for discussion that will require a change in board policy IE, organization of instruction, and wanted to present that policy for your review.
Any questions from any board? Mr. Scully.
Dr. Ross, have you had a chance to present this to the PAC yet, and what feedback did they provide?
Yes, so we spoke with PAC about it. Because a lot of the elementary schools are K-5 in the district, I only think like 3 of the elementary schools are not K-5. Seemed to make a lot of sense. I think there was a lot of excitement about the middle school level being consistent. There was concern in the Chapin area I don't want to say all of Chapin, because there are, we hear some feedback from Piney Woods about going to 5, but we also, going K through 5. But we also hear some feedback from Chapin Intermediate about the great model of 5-6. And so one of the things that we said is you can find research on a lot of different grade structures. There are K-12 grade structures that work well, K-8, K-6. There are a lot of different ones. We just need to pick what we're going to do that works consistently and effectively across our school district. If you look at certification, elementary certification is K-5. When you get to 6th grade, you have a different certification. So in some of our 5-6 grade structure, you may have a teacher that's certified to teach on one end of the building, not certified to teach on the other end. We look at allocation of resources. So this more streamlines our district, understands that with the intermediate, we have one school. It's a one-year school. And it's very tough to build that transition. Also, this, I think, which we're not presenting tonight, but we will present at subsequent meeting, a proposal of how we would rezone into this grade structure. And when you see, when that's made to the public, or those drafts are made, that we talked about at the workshop, you can see how we're more community, there's more community flow with this versus taking 10 elementary schools, moving them to one middle school. How the resulting rezoning or redistricting in this model creates a more natural community flow K-12 and therefore would help with vertical articulation. And I believe in our whole child model, keeping that language of social emotional, I think we'll get much better gains that way.
Mr. Satterfield.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Mr. Ross said. Years ago, when we went to the middle school, there was out of, I want to say Colorado, at a conference there, they came out with what's called the middle school model. And it was something to help children, because that's a very awkward age, 6 through 8. It's just, middle school is just tough. But the middle school model sort of addressed the very issues that we've been talking about with regards to the social development and the emotional issues and things like that and the struggles. By getting them, there were all kind of, matter of fact, they had classes, they had breaks in their classes where they were part of a club. Everybody was part of a club. And everybody had an adult sort of mentor that they could talk with, and they spent, there was designated times for that. So I think this would work, this plan, so to speak, this structure would work very well for that. So, yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Ms. Huddle.
I'd like to echo what Mr. Satterfield said. Having 2 girls that were 2 years apart and came up through when we had a middle school, where I lived in the district, I thought it worked really well. The only comment I'd make about just the policy itself and the wording of the policy is policies generally, although they do get reviewed, they're kind of meant to stand the test of time. And the reality is we can't move to this right away. So I might suggest a little bit slight wording change to say something like a preferred structure of this where feasible or something like that, because the reality is if we pass this policy at the next board meeting, we're not going to be able to do this right away. And then the other thing, which we haven't talked about yet, but at the bottom where we're changing the district about the virtual program, I would suggest we leave it the way it was, and I'm just going to explain why. First of all, the old wording said may, not will, and so it didn't force the superintendent to offer anything if there weren't enough children to meet that program. So if there weren't enough K-5 children, you didn't have to do it. The other reason I would suggest that is, and keep it K 5 through 12, is even though I'm sure the superintendent would desire to move to 6 through 12, you never know when there's going to be another spike in COVID or something else, and you don't really want to have to go through a policy change to be able to open up 5 back up. So that would just be a suggestion that I would have that would give you more latitude to do what you need to do based on the circumstances at that point in time.
Any other questions? Dr. Ross, I had one, and you might have covered it. In a perfect world, what do you anticipate estimated, like, targeted implementation date?
So that's going to go along with the adoption of the 5-year plan. To Ms. Huddle's point, we can't move to this in our current fleet. So it would take modification of buildings or to move that way. So what we look forward to is, this is step one, moving us to that 5-year study. And then once we get the feedback from our A&E team and our Office of Student Services and Planning, then I think we can make a better call of, all right, here are our options of moving in, redistricting, not redistricting, and then provide those options to the board.
Any other questions? And this is the discussion agenda item. I do not believe we're taking
No,
action
no
on it.
action, no.
Correct, okay. If nothing else, everybody's comfortable moving to 16. Discussion of new board policy GCLE, unencumbered time, shown in Exhibit J.
Also, I'll ask our Chief of Human Resources, Dr. Tamara Turner, to come forward and bring a new policy from the state.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hogan, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Ross. This discussion is to prepare you for the forthcoming model policies related to the unencumbered time for teachers. By way of background, the State Board of Education actually adopted a model policy on January 17th. And at their direction, districts are advised within 3 months to move forward with adopting a local board policy as it relates to this. The biggest items required or directed under this law is that elementary teachers must be provided with 30 minutes of unencumbered time. And regardless of grade level, K through 12, any teacher responsible for instructing a special education class for more than 20% of the school day with students who are removed from the general education setting, they also are to have at least 30 minutes of unencumbered time. So there's the 3-month expectation for districts to move forward with adopting a policy, and full implementation should be in place before July 1st, 2023. By definition of what's been shared, unencumbered time would be self-directed by the teacher. There would not be any additional responsibilities or duties. The model policy even goes so far as to outline things that should not be included in that 30 minutes. And there's a bulleted list there that includes direct instruction, supervision of students, parent-teacher conferences, bus duty, IEP and 504 meetings, team meetings, professional development activities that are not self-directed, managing or supervising the transition of students to and from activities, classes, lunch, recess, or any other activities. So in conclusion, what I'll be presenting to the board are a sample policy, and that sample policy comes from the information released by the State Board of Education, as well as the South Carolina School Boards Association. We've already we've started conversations with our principals, because the spirit of this policy is written so that a lot of responsibility lies on the principals to ensure that that schedule is in place and teachers are provided with this unencumbered time. And so this discussion allows you an opportunity to have this information before we actually start looking at the model policy. Please let me know if there are any questions I can answer for you in preparation of the presentation of the policy over the next few board meetings.
Mr. Satterfield.
Yeah, this is obviously written by someone who does not have to enforce this. It's sort of a shame, though, that we have to come up with a law to give teachers 30 minutes of unencumbered time. But that's just the demands of a teacher nowadays. That said, and now you said it could not be used for IEPs or 504s.
That's correct.
So are we going to schedule those before school and after school? Are we going to have teachers just step in and give their 2 cents and then leave the meeting because they have to stay and sign the IEP or the 504 that they're a part of, and they're the ones that are the majority of implementing that whatever plan is derived. So they really need to be a part of the plan. So how would you address that? How as a district would we address that?
Those are the building blocks that we're working on now.
Yeah.
The priority right now, what we know that's happening in schools right now is, for example, elementary teachers currently get 50 minutes of planning time. We know that that 50 minutes is typically consumed with all of the tasks, all of the bullets that were on the
Right.
previous slide. So I think the priority for principals is to make sure that we're complying with the law. Right now, the suggestion or recommendation that they are considering, making at least 30 of the 50 minutes unencumbered and trying to determine what can be scheduled in the remaining 20 minutes. That would be ideal. That would be the priority, so that we're not adding these additional duties on at the beginning or end. But it is very much a trial and error, so that we can definitely get it right before full implementation in July.
Yeah, I just know there's going to be a lot of, I mean, if they're involved with data teams, and I mean, if we're talking about unencumbered,
Yes, sir.
where they actually can go to the bathroom and get us something to drink and have that time. But that's going to, yeah, and you know, elementary teachers, they walk their kids to class and they go and pick them up from class. So that takes up part of their planning typically. So there are, you know, there are a lot of little nuances there that you're going to have, that I don't say you are going to have to work on, but there are things to consider though for those teachers. And no lunch duties. I mean, or is that just that you got to find that 30 minutes in there?
We have to find that 30 minutes. So
okay.
one of the things about this model policy is it does not require every building to accomplish this in the same way. So one of the ways that we're working with principals is we provided this information and asked them, how do you anticipate this may work with your current schedule and building needs? And most of our principals have offered 2 options. One, they want to either unencumber 30 of the 50-minute planning, or 2, they want to restructure their lunch. I think a few are looking at even some schedule accommodations to the amount of time provided in their lunchtime so that they can accomplish it. So it's either one of the 2 ways, with one being the lunch option, the second being the planning block being unencumbered.
And one other question is, what if you have a school where you have several self-contained classrooms? And, I mean, the teacher, typically, they don't leave their classrooms. They go, some of them even travel and go with them to their special area classes and things like that. I mean, yeah, that's going to be a tough charge, too. So,
If I may, we've, in our deliberations, just kind of sharing with you, what's interesting is I think we're about a year into tackling this in terms of knowing that we wanted to provide that, because that has been a request of elementary teachers for some time. So we have, even before the model policy came out, we're doing deliberations, and we started out with Tina McCaskill working with the principals, because the hardest piece was the elementary. Secondary is just making sure that we schedule around their daily planning, but elementary is where the rubber meets the road. And we looked at everything as we tried to commandeer some bus drivers from Mr. Wiseman to help with supervision. That wasn't going to work in a sustainable method. And we looked at what would it take to bring on extra staff to take recess. And then we have the legal obligations of supervision that it makes it tough, exactly for when we talk about some of our ID students or students that, whether it's the feeding tubes or whatever, you need certifications to work there. So there's a lot where we have to work out, but we feel like the best is we're blessed in our district. The Midland superintendents were talking about, how do you implement this? And we're all, trying to, with your current staff, right? How do you implement this? And we're very blessed that we have the exploratory structure where we at least have that 50 minutes. But to your larger point, and Dr. Turner, correct me if I'm wrong, a teacher can't opt out of this either.
No, this is something that's not optional. So in addition to creating the schedule, the responsibility will also be on the principal to monitor and supervise to ensure that the culture, because you're right, this is a cultural shift that's much needed, but it's very different. So principals will have the responsibility of also supervising to ensure that teachers are not opting out of this. This is mandated by law, and so we need to do everything to comply with that.
Mr. Scully?
Yeah, so it looks like according to this policy, our D-Day is July 1 of this year. So, and that's to completely implement the policy. So I guess to you guys, I would ask, what's your timeline in regards to that? And what do you need from us and when? What can we do to help?
So law says that we must pass the policy, but we have 3 months after do you know that?
Yes, sir. We were given 3 months as of January 17th, but so before the April is the deadline for actual policy implementation. And so, would you like to finish, Dr. Ross?
No.
Okay. So in terms of answering that question, what we're asking for board support is helping us with getting the policy in place as outlined by the Department of Education. And what we're doing, and I do want to recognize the work of Tina McCaskill. She's no longer here at the meeting, but she's been working as a liaison between the Office of Human Resources and principals. So we are already doing a lot of piloting, a lot of give us a proposed schedule, put it in place. Where does it work? Where doesn't it work? To your point, Mr. Satterfield, some of the questions about how realistic is it that we're going to be able to work some of those other things in. So while we are working with principals on practicing implementation, we're asking the board for help with actually getting the policy finalized so that we can meet that deadline as well.
Just to follow up, are there any additional trainings that you're going to require or be needed as far as, like Mr. Satterfield said, the administrators and principals having to implement this and enforce it? Any funding additionally that will need to be allocated for that, or that you anticipate, or?
Yeah, I want to thank you for that question. I think the number one thing we could probably message, there's very harsh language in here for our principals. This is their first year, especially elementary, and I think sometimes when policies are written, it's kind of written for 25 general education students sitting in the classroom, and it doesn't handle the intricacies of some of our most needy students. And the penalties that these things outline on I'll take it as a superintendent, but I don't want our principals feeling like if they missed, somebody had 29 minutes that their certificate is up. And I think just kind of recognition from the board that we're working, towards this because we don't know if I need to bring in someone to have this specific skill set for these 30 minutes while that person takes a break. I want that teacher to feel like they're not leaving a child behind, so to speak. That transition usually takes more than the 6 months we'll have to implement it. So I think, yes, we'll adopt it, but we're messaging to our principals that, our goal is to churn the wheel in getting to that point. We'll have a base plan that provides it, but we know life happens too.
Ms. Huddle.
I noticed the policy says, if an eligible staff member's unencumbered time is reduced, withheld, or voluntarily relinquished, additional compensation may not be offered in place of unencumbered time except as provided by state law. So I know, I talked to you, Dr. Ross, because I've had a couple of teachers express an interest in like a stipend for giving up their lunch or to cover lunch, but I'm guessing this means we can't do that.
Yeah, there's no negotiation away from the unencumbered time, so it is truly, this is the pause during that, which is just kind of unique as a principal. You are responsible for supervision for, if it's a campus of 700 students, that one principal is responsible for all 700, and so you can't watch all 700, so you depend on supervision broken up into, by those teachers. When you take the whole building at one time, you know, this is not how it works, but if you take parts of that building where supervisory authority is taken away from a fifth or a third or half of that's the struggle we have, because the principal does not have a break of responsibility of supervision for 30 minutes. When you give it to the teachers, I totally understand, but those students are still being students. So that's the part that we have. While in that rotation, we are looking at, you know, you're looking, and I think, you know, I pick on Mr. Wiseman. So we said, well, look, we'll take your bus drivers, and they'll handle that 30 minutes. And while that works in certain cases, it doesn't work wholesale. So we are saying what ends up happening, to Mr. Satterfield's point, is your IEP meeting. You know, these are hour-long affairs, right, at minimum. Now it's a 20-minute. Well, that's a whole different engagement to a family when that teacher almost seems like they're just passing through. So those are the things that we need flexibility on level one there. And as we did this study, we realized that, you know, we may have to adjust some bell schedules and some drop-off times to make that work. So we understand the objective of the law. It's the implementation. And as that principal knows that they're responsible for the supervision of every last child, that entire 7.5 hours. So when you have these intermittent 30-minute breaks, that's what they're going to need, that flexibility as we work through it. So we'll have a base model plan, but we need to, the power's in the pivot, as I always say, and we need that flexibility to pivot with it.
Any other questions? Seeing none? Comfortable moving on to 17? This one's near and dear to my heart. Do I have a motion for 17? Anybody?
Oh, I'll
Anybody
take
wants?
it.
Ms. Huddle?
In honor of Matt Hogan, I move that we adjourn.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Ms. Snipes. All those in favor? That is 5-9. There we go.